So my intro to Gareth came about. I was out in Helsinki at Slush this time last year, and as I jump into a taxi to the event, I offer a couple of people in the hotel lobby a couple of spare seats in the cab. And as I started talking about what the Grafter did, and in particular the eight-figure exit service, Laura from Connected said, "You must meet Gareth Hawkins." And that for me was the intro to Gareth.
Nice to see my extended network advocating for me. Too often it's the opposite. God, you got to avoid that bloke. But no, Laura Gordon, absolute legend. Her time at Connected, she was busily the super connector, putting various people in similar spaces together, and I'm delighted that we were forefront in her mind. But yes, she probably was thinking to herself, it's not often that I meet people that are serving this space, the M&A space, given that Connected does so much with the early stage startup space. So hopefully she didn't have too much of a plethora of people to choose from in trying to connect us, but I'm glad that she did.
And I wholeheartedly agree. And so, post the Slush event, Gareth and I got together and started talking about. I talked him through the eight-figure exit service, and at that point, BizCrunch had a buy-side platform, and we're moving to a sell-side platform. And instead of building out lots of the planning around exit, I said to Gareth, let's see if we can't do a bit of a show and tell and actually bring these two services together.
Yeah, it seemed a really fortuitous moment, actually, with the work that you had done in putting together this amazing program and the work that we were trying to do to improve the amount of M&A that takes place in the UK by effectively making it easier for sellers or business owners to explore, learn, and succeed in selling their companies. It seemed like a no-brainer to me at the time when you were explaining what eight-figure exit was, that we should do something together in some way. It was crying out for a joint venture in some way, Rach.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And fast forward kind of 10 months, lots and lots of discussions, lots of show and tell time. And you guys have been busily building out the sell side proposition. And so we formally went live last week. Was it last week or this week?
Yeah, beginning of August.
Formally went live beginning of August in way of a joint collaboration, and we're super excited. Can't wait to start moving some prospects through the eight-figure exit journey and ultimately support them in actually selling their businesses. The reality, as we all know, is there is only a very small percentage of companies that get the business up for sale and actually successfully manage to do that transaction. And I think if we can contribute to that, even in a small way, we can genuinely give the UK economy a real push.
Yeah, I mean, the figures are woeful in the UK for small business succession M&A. Typically, owners are having to look at internal succession opportunities, but it's really quite worrying how little of that exists. A survey just post-pandemic identified that only about 30% of companies in the developed world actually have a succession strategy at all. Shawbrook Bank and the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers this year did a survey of small business owners. 40% of them said, we're looking at exiting, we're thinking about selling our businesses. 40% of SMBs. And then the deeper detail there is that 72% of those 40% needed to explore external sale opportunities because they didn't have family succession or team succession available to them. So they couldn't do MBO, for example. They needed external interest. So That's an astonishing number of companies. If we think about how many companies in the UK do change hands every year, it's less than 2,000 small businesses actually get sold. Um, but there are, I think, according to one stat, there's about 50,000 UK businesses that are publicly for sale in the SMB space. So 4% of those are actually selling. I know the stats say that 80% of companies that are put up for sale don't sell. But only according to the sort of ONS statistics, only 4% of them effectively have. So that less than 2,000 is 6-7 times less than in the States, where well over 12,000 small businesses sell every year. So we've got to do something in the UK to try and get more succession, because otherwise there's this massive economic risk through loss of employment.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of compounded with, even this morning, reading news around R&D tax credits and, UK government debating going back over the last sort of 3-4 years and trying to claw back some of the R&D money, and plenty of businesses these days spinning up outside of the UK, because let's face it, there just aren't the tax breaks and the tax benefits to encourage building a business in the UK. So if you start to stifle the market at the start, then here's the news: as it moves through the process, through the growth and the scaling to exit, of course, there's going to be a lot less in the hopper in the first place.
I challenge that a little bit as regards capital available and tax incentives available at the very beginning of the journey. Like, you and I know, doing angel investing, that there are some tax advantages to being those early check writers. So I think, it started under the Blair and Brown era, the whole EIS, SEIS thing. So that's been in place for a long time, and that does stimulate a lot of capital flowing in to those really early stage companies. But I think the UK kind of market has become obsessed with either public companies or brand new startup companies, and the bit in the middle is where it's at best neglected, at worst taxed to the hilt. Which is why I think and we're seeing this in the early stage economy, like, to your point, companies spinning up overseas. Well, they're spinning up in the UK, getting the advantage of the UK investment opportunity, and then spinning up a subsidiary in UAE, for example, where it's a much lower tax regime, and then sort of flipping, if you will, out into that jurisdiction, or going after maybe slightly more favorable conditions to scale in the States and doing a Delaware flip. And so, do we really want to be, as an economy, just this kind of like springboard that creates a company, sucks in a bit of capital, and then another jurisdiction gets to benefit from the growth of that company? I mean, something's wrong if that's becoming that kind of farm.
No, I agree. And that's a fair challenge from an SEIS, EIS perspective. I naturally think as a bootstrapper. So my inclination is more around where are the benefits on that journey? Digital nomad, other bits and pieces, how do we start to attract that? But it's absolutely a fair challenge. But I think a valid point that you make around that if we're not careful, we will be, a starter, a main course, or a dessert, but we won't be the full complement. That's the reality, isn't it, in the UK? So if we can start to create an environment where people can see what that process looks like and see and feel more transactions happening, and I think also create a space where entrepreneurs are domain experts in their respective areas, but they don't necessarily become domain experts in exiting businesses until they've been through it a few times. So the more we can do to wrap that kind of support service around as part of this joint proposition, I think the better the outcome.
Yeah, and you're doing that with the Grafter at sort of different stages, aren't you? You're working with startups, scale ups, and sell ups now, I guess, with 8-figure exit. But on the growth side, with what you're doing to help companies, on that trajectory to really scale up their businesses, that is hugely important to the UK economy. But it's got to lead somewhere, and hopefully that somewhere is a reasonably smooth exit. But exits are not abundant enough in order to serve the need. Typically it's been IPO, but there's a reluctance and resistance to IPO in this climate, or trade sale, or get picked up at a later stage by private equity, all of which are good, just don't happen in enough volume. So how do we help the rest of the middle part of the scale up space, if you like, the middle part of the economy, to achieve those exits? That's the mission, right?
That is absolutely the mission, Gareth, and very much looking forward to executing on said mission in very short order.
So where we're coming from at Bizcrunch is we think that there needs to be more sellers and more buyers, and the sellers are there, but they haven't necessarily had the best help. And if you look at the broker model, you'll see, unfortunately, a lot of parallels to the predatory nature of the early stage market, where there's a fair few service providers hanging on, looking to charge some sort of fairly punitive fees, but not really doing a lot of work to justify them. And so that dated model of sort of wham bam, thank you ma'am, stick you up on a website, charge you 20 grand and hope for the best, good luck, with a tail gunner clause in the contract that says if by any means you manage to sell within the next 3 years, we're on for 2 or 3% of the exit value. That feels really self-serving and doesn't feel like it's serving the sellers well at all, which I think is probably one of the contributory factors to why there aren't enough deals completed in the UK economy. But then on the buyer side, this whole American movement of entrepreneurship through acquisition has taken decades to start to permeate the UK, largely because it was given such a catapult in the US through business schools and the Small Business Administration. And it's just become a huge movement with something like 450 active search funds, where they're, effectively like micro private equity led by an entrepreneur to go and buy these established companies and build a holdco. That's becoming more and more prolific in the States. The SBA wrote, I think, 12,000 loans in a year, totaling about 6.5 billion specifically for that purpose. We haven't had anything like that in the UK, but now it's starting, the tide is turning. So you've got Cambridge Judge, Oxford Said, LBS, Henley, Warwick, all starting to offer elective courses in entrepreneurship through acquisition now. So folks are coming out of these business schools not just automatically thinking, I've got to run a startup, I've got to launch, I've got to go 0 to 1, I've got to do the hard miles. They're actually now, they've got a choice, they've got an alternative to go and look at established companies and taking the reins there and digitally transforming these established businesses and doing value creation that way, which is a huge opportunity. So the awareness is growing there. And on the 1st of July this year, we had the Growth Guarantee Scheme launched by the British Business Bank, which is the closest we've ever got to having an SBA type 7A loan, where the government's underwriting, I think, 70% of the value of the loan. And the LTVs are quite high and the personal guarantee element's quite low. And we've now got this opportunity, I think, to start funding these sort of M&As for individual searcher ETA entrepreneurs. So I think naturally, as a consequence of these conditions aligning, we're going to have more buyers. So hopefully that will drive more sellers. And then we just got to make the bit in the middle, the tired manual paper-driven offline process that is M&A. We've got to make that more modern. And that's what we're here to do with the digital transformation through Bizcrunch.
I I think it's interesting that, Gareth, in way of for me coming into this industry new, I see a pretty archaic way of operating, and
Yeah.
having met a number of private equity firms and VCs, the opportunities that we've seen and we've seized in plenty of other sectors to move forward from a digital perspective just hasn't been taken. I remember back in healthcare, before building out the NHS app, at that point there was no value creation for engaging with the NHS. And in a lot of ways, I see this industry in the same space. But I think it's right, therefore, for some disruption, but also to aid and support entrepreneurs through that process and make it something that is achievable, is going to be particularly exciting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you've seen firsthand the benefit and power of digital transformation in, you know, an area of the economy or an area of society that was crying out for it, right? Where it was creaking at the seams because it was trying to run in a modern society on outdated infrastructure. And yeah, I'm hardly surprised that it kind of resonated with you when you looked at the private equity space and the M&A space. And I mean, I bought a number of companies through my career, sold a couple, and still absolutely amazes me how paper driven, how focused on man hours with billable hours with lawyers it is. Um, so outdated. And yet it is like a really important part of the finance industry, much of finance of which has become very digital.
It's really funny that, Gareth, because I remember the sale of my last business as we went through. Well, one, we were in COVID, so I wondered whether it had actually been made more digital as a result. We could use DocuSign for some of this stuff, but I found it hideous. In way of I felt like a celeb in a way, in how much bloody signing I had to do. But the reality was it was so archaic in way of having to get somebody in to validate who we actually were in person during a pandemic to be assured. And yeah, it was so incredibly paper heavy, and of course there's huge cost there, isn't there? Because every single time you're recreating that from the right from the off, which again I think platforms like Bizcrunch are aiming to address in where some of the consolidation and some of the starting to think about, add-on services around SPAs and other bits and pieces that can be done digitally. And, God forbid that kind of 80-20 rule. I mean, nobody wants to get those things wrong, but there is an awful lot of learning that allows those processes to move a whole lot faster than they do at the minute.
Yeah, but there's a whole body of knowledge out there, and there's a whole. I mean, it's a beautiful time to be building a business with AI available to you to optimize and automate various parts of functions which would usually have been hugely labor intensive, manually labor intensive. So yeah, just with that kind of arsenal available, it makes the digital disruption ever more, I will say, easier. I might eat those words later,
Yeah.
but certainly more possible, more plausible. So if we can leverage some of those tools to the benefit of the sellers and the buyers and reduce the cost and the complexity and the time involved, hopefully that will just naturally lead to more M&A.
Yeah, agree. And Gareth, may I ask just one question from a data perspective in relation to BizCrunch? Because
Yeah.
I looked at the platform early on in the build cycle, and am I right in thinking that you have got such a rich data set and knowledge around the businesses that you can therefore identify potential sellers and buyers in a way that other competitors can't?
Yeah, that's the USP. So it's a busy space. There's lots of folks out there that are purporting to do M&A advisory and some sort of transactional support. We went a very different route. We wanted to build a SaaS. We actually wanted to build a database for our own purposes because my co-founder Adam and I were out there looking at our next business roll-up acquisition opportunities, and we very quickly realized that a lot of people are wasting a lot of time on trying to join the dots and put together all the pieces that help you build a deal flow pipeline. So, historically, you would go to company's house and you would try and find some companies by SIC code, and then you would try and piece together some financials about those companies so that you could get an idea of which ones might be viable targets. Then you've got to work out who owns them. Then you've got to, having identified the owners, work out how to contact them. Then do the outreach. It's days of work that analysts are being well paid to do, but it protracts the whole process and it reduces the whole volume that can be achieved. So we went, well, look, we want deal flow, so let's build a more efficient kind of database around this. So we took the 5.7 million companies that are on UK Companies House, and we indexed all of them where we needed to. We OCR'd all of their accounts information and started to look through all of the data there as we populated it into proper traditional queryable databases. So now we've been able to kind of reverse engineer P&Ls for companies, and no one else has really been able to do that to any great extent, certainly not across the entire piece. So where the UK law allows companies that are doing less than 10 million revenue to not have to be audited and therefore not have to file anything other than a very brief filleted balance sheet, it's impossible normally for people to be able to, at a glance, go, oh, that's a 10 million revenue company, or that's a 500,000 EBITDA company. So what we've done through kind of the metadata on the balance sheet and indexing that alongside sort of benchmarked industry standards, if you will, around things like debtor days and um, um, profit distributions, tax. We've been able to rebuild from things like current assets and year-on-year changes in P&L reserves. We've been able to kind of re-engineer the P&Ls to give an indicative estimate around the actual size of the company. So you've got that plus employee number data, and you can get a bit of a proxy for which of these 5.7 million companies are actually within your sweet spot of a size and shape that you want to acquire. So we did that. That was job one, building the buy side database. Then we were able to go and look at all of the ownership structures of those companies, and then using the tools that now exist, enrich those ownership structures with emails and LinkedIn's and various ways to contact those owners. So we've pared down from 5.7 million companies in the UK to about 500,000, which are acquirable by some means or another, in so much as they're independently owned. They're employing more than one person. They've got some material revenue. I mean, our revenue threshold is 1 million plus. So our 500,000 companies in the database are doing 1 million plus revenue. And we can, at a glance, with a very simple search UI, make it easy for people to be able to find them, export them, do their outreach, and then start to get them into negotiation. So that was product one on the buy side, and we just launched with a community of 2,500 searchers last week. So we're up to 100 or so active regular users now, which is great on the buy side, and that will only grow, which has now given us the kind of impetus to go and do more on the sell side to help gradually bring the two together without going the full broker route. It's a value added SaaS on one side and then a value added SaaS on the other.
Brill, that's really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, because we wouldn't be able to do the sell side piece without the Grafter.
Very happy to support, mate. Very excited to see where it's all going to.
Yeah, exactly. So when they get through the sort of exit readiness program that we're working on together in the Bizcrunch environment as a sell side product, they've done their valuation, they've done their assessment, and they've followed all of the great content that you've provided them. Then it's go time, right? Then they should be in a position where, with a little bit of work, they're ready to start preparing their business for exit. And so maybe you'd like to speak a little bit to what happens then at the Grafter when you and your team of exiteers go deep.
So how we work is we have half a dozen of us who are all exiteers, and we have varying domain expertise, be it health, be it data, be it FMCG, whatever it is. And so we kind of map and match the right exiteer to the right founder. And that founder will then work with an exiteer for a 12 or a 24-week process to actually build out the key components of exit readiness. So it would be building out a sell pack, a data room, being clear on the valuation today, but also starting to think about if they made some tweaks and they made some changes to how they operate, they could also increase that number. And then it starts to have a look at what does the founder actually want from this exit. And I think this is probably heading into some of the USP territory because a lot of the time there isn't that softer side on understanding what does the founder want to go and do next, and also getting them in the right headspace for any transaction. and perhaps most importantly, for that earn-out period, which plenty of us have to go through. So we would then have a look at any road bumps, so any areas that really need looking at, in way of bad levers and contracts and other bits and pieces, and then anything fundamental from a showstopper perspective. So is there a shareholder that came in for half an hour at the start of the journey that needs tidying away before any transaction actually happens? And by going through that process from a service perspective, and having a coach in an exeter who has been there, seen it, done it, what it allows is for the founder or the founding team to be in a much stronger position to actually understand the value of their business. By definition, you'll be looking at competition, potential buyers, other bits and pieces. But a lot of the time, founders are on the back foot because someone comes knocking and starts extending offers. They don't have a data room, they haven't done a valuation, and lo and behold, for varying reasons, transaction doesn't happen, or a transaction happens that has a much lower price tag than it should. So what we have been able to prove over the last 14 months is that businesses that are going through 8-figure exit, there is a direct correlation with where they were and where they get to in way of maximising the value of any potential transaction. We've had... sorry, Gareth, go ahead.
I was going to say that is so valuable, and you as you were explaining it, you carried it through so eloquently, but it's easily missed by anybody that wasn't paying close attention. Like the real value in having a guide, having a Sherpa, having an exeter that has walked this path and been in the trenches and can not only do the financial and the commercial preparation piece, but also the emotional and psychological preparation, because that's underestimated and often overlooked. Like the seller's mindset for the kind of deal and the kind of negotiation they're going to have to go through, and the kind of earn out period they're going to have to endure, for want of a better phrase. That all takes some mental preparation, and by the end of my sale and exit period in the last business that I sold, definite PTSD that no one had ever prepared me for, and obviously I was doing it through COVID like you were. So I think, it's not to be underestimated that just how helpful that guide can be.
I wholeheartedly agree. And my motivation for building 8-figure exit came right off the back of selling the second business, which was I wanted that service myself. And let's face it, plenty of us build businesses because we see a gap in the market, or it's a service that we've wanted and needed, and that was the direct impact. And I could talk for an extended period about how tricky I found my earnout. But I think looking back on it, and I say this to founders on a regular basis, it was still the right deal. It was still the right time, and it was still the right opportunity. And if you walk away from it feeling that, then it's a good result. If you'd spoken to me half an hour after the transaction had happened, I think my mental health may have told you a slightly different story. But the reason we focus on the emotional and the softer side, alongside the commercial and the contractual, is to make sure that people understand, it is a lively period. The negotiation, you've got one eye on the business as usual. You're trying to run the bloody company and you're trying to negotiate and do a deal. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's incredibly tricky. You're running 2+ full-time jobs there. And being able to have a sounding board, have the experience. It's as essential, in my opinion, as having a lawyer sit alongside a transaction.
It's having the confidence to stay the course, and how they say time kills all deals, and part of that is running out of puff. It's one side of that equation throwing in the towel, it feels all too much like hard work. So the successful deals that complete are really well aligned because the seller is prepared, they're ready, they're in the right mindset, they found what they believe to be the right buyer. That cultural fit as well as the financial fit is important, and again often overlooked. And just like you'd have your ideal customer profile, you really want your ideal acquirer profile to be able to work out who you're going to be comfortable climbing into bed with for the next couple of years, and who you're going to be comfortable being the custodian and steward of your team post your departure, and all that sort of stuff. And there aren't enough hours devoted to preparing sellers for that alone.
Oh, great. And I do think that's the bit. Plenty of us grow these businesses. It's the family feel. It's your baby. And as you hand it over, sell it, you no longer have that responsibility. And it's very hard emotionally. It's very difficult. And getting the balance right about who that business goes to is absolutely crucial.
So that combination of consulting and coaching, I think, is a really valuable USP that the Grafter and 8-Figure Exit brings, that many M&A advisory kind of companies that focus more on the transactional element of it completely miss. So an absolute delight knowing that Bizcrunch seller users, having come to us to explore their options and start their journey, go into safe hands with a real well structured program of people that care about the outcome with the Grafter going through 8-Figure Exit, hopefully then come back fully ready to be connected with some of the buyers on our platform.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit, isn't it? I'm hoping that we, re-record some content in 6 months and talk about how we've taken some prospects through that journey and made that a reality. Within 14 months of launching 8-Figure Exit, we've taken 22 companies through the service, and we have had 2 exit that we'd sat alongside and supported. And the reality is the proof is in the pudding, and so it's those tangible evidence-based bits that we really want to bring to life. We have a joint mission and a strategy around helping move some of the UK economy piece along. But I think we want to be able to articulate these success stories in a 6 to 9 month period, ideally.
Yeah, those stats speak for themselves, and that's a really nice ratio, and I'm sure that will grow in terms of numbers of participants and exits, and exits as a percentage of participants. I think this should be achieving considerable or increased success over the average.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this grows and develops. Because we are working together to try and stave off, a risk to the UK economy. It's been calculated that if these businesses don't sell, it's probably going to cost the UK about 160 billion a year in lost fiscal income, in potential increased welfare cost. These retiring owners, this whole silver tsunami must be addressed. It must be an exit route that is beyond just members' voluntary liquidation, wrap the company up. They've got to go into new homes so that there's continuity of employment, continuity of economic contribution. This is a major pending issue that we are doing our little bit to try and stave off. So yeah, hopefully we can help perpetuate the movement and help UK PLC to keep more people employed.
Wholeheartedly agree, bro. Thank you very much, Gareth.
Thank you, Rach. Looking forward to getting stuck in. Let's go.